Welcome, everyone. My name is Clare Nelson. I'm the Vice President for Business Development and Product Strategy for ZEXE. We're a pioneer in the realm of identity, and we're focusing on zero-knowledge proofs, digital ledger technology, and a custom token based on tokenomics that's a variation of SweetBridge, if you know about all that. So this is going to be a fairly technical session, but it will leave you with some nuggets about privacy coins and why you should care. So what are privacy coins? Raise of hands, who knows about privacy coins? What are some names of some privacy coins? Just shout it out. Zcash? Monero? Any others? Pardon? Zcoin? Dash, very good. So there's some knowledge here. Basically, privacy coins, and this is one variation of the definition, they hide the identities of the sender and the receiver. So there's this concept of anonymity. And any math majors in the room? Then none of you will be convinced that there's anything, you can't be anonymous. Maybe pseudonymous, which means you apply some information and knowledge and you get to the person. But really, anonymity is a very abstract concept. I see some heads shaking, yes. And then confidentiality in terms of privacy coins means that the amount transferred is hidden. So these are abstract notions, but we're trying to achieve an approximation of these very abstract notions of being anonymous and hiding the amount transferred. So how do some coins achieve this privacy? Some of them are using zero-knowledge proofs. So raise of hands, who's heard of zero-knowledge proofs? Oh, some of you were in the privacy session. Very good. So according to Matthew Green, zero-knowledge proofs are the most powerful tools cryptographers have ever devised. Is this hyperbole? Is he exaggerating? Basically, with zero-knowledge proofs, there are two entities, a prover and a verifier. And the prover proves to a verifier the validity of a statement and yields nothing other than the validity of the statement. There's a notion of randomness. Think of a coin toss. And zero-knowledge proofs are not deterministic. They are probabilistic. That means with zero-knowledge proofs, they don't provide absolute certainty, but you can get, in some cases, astronomically close or as close as you need to be. So for you, the left side of this slide is for my cipher queen friends here, Charisse, Vanny, and maybe some of you other experts. The right side of this slide is for my brothers, or those of you that just want to know the bottom line. And on the right side, we have cheating dogs playing poker. Because keep in mind, zero-knowledge proofs were meant to mitigate against cheaters and survive in a harsh environment. So zero-knowledge proofs have three basic requirements: completeness, soundness, and zero-knowledge. And completeness is it's a mitigation against a cheating verifier. If the statement is true, and if the verifier follows the protocol, then they'll be convinced by the prover. And with soundness, it's a mitigation against a cheating prover. If the statement is false, the cheating prover can't convince the verifier. And then we get to some of the mathematics. I'm going to avoid what people call the moon math. There are mountains of moon math, or complex, deep, profound mathematics. We're just going to stay at the high level, but there is some small probability with soundness that the cheating prover could succeed, but it's very, very small. And then, of course, the zero knowledge means that nothing is leaked other than the validity of the statement. So no leakage of information, no leakage of how was the calculation, how was the proof created. So there are many use cases for zero-knowledge proofs. Transaction validation, you can use it for authentication, but basically you preserve privacy. And there are many different constructs. For instance, range proofs is a person between a certain age, between 20 and 50. You can give a Boolean yes or no without revealing that actual age. Set membership is a person, citizen of France. Yes, but then you could just say they're a citizen of the EU. You do not have to explicitly state what set they are a member of. And then comparisons. Does something match? Does a driver's license number match? Computational integrity, I'll have an example of that. So it's a basic fundamental tool, and it can be used in many different ways. So I'll give you a very high-level example. 007 wants to read the news. He goes online to the Daily Telegraph, and they say, "Who are you?" And of course he responds, "I could tell you, but then I'll have to kill you." In another scenario, he forks over his subscription. And then what happens? His digital exhaust can be collected, aggregated, and the Daily Telegraph can know everything about him, and then they can also sell that information to someone else. So that's not a very privacy-preserving experience. What he could do, and this is a proof of completeness, fork over a zero-knowledge proof that shows that, yes, indeed, he has a valid subscription. And this is complete because the Daily Telegraph, following the protocol, accepts the zero-knowledge proof. And Soundness, remember Soundness? That's a mitigation against imposters or cheating provers. Here, M fails, and the Daily Telegraph will reject her attempt. So now that you have a basic example of what zero-knowledge proofs look like, what if you wanted a zero-knowledge proof that's publicly verifiable by a very large population? So let's say Jaffa's running, she wants to be president, and you need to prove that she is not in the FBI National Offender DNA Database. You could publish a proof, and this is a variation called the ZK Stark proof. You could publish that on a ledger or someplace where everyone could determine that, could read that and verify it. And it's possible to do this. Remember the cheating dogs? So there are all kinds of mitigations against cheaters, and you can perform this operation. The FBI would get her DNA, prove that it's not in the National Offender Database, and then publish the results. And this can all be done without leaking any information about Jaffa, without leaking any information about the DNA database. And it's a correct it's a correct example with no cheating. That's without going into any other of the mathematics or the underpinnings of this, another example of the strength and power of zero-knowledge proofs. So are all zero-knowledge proofs the same? Yes or no? There aren't. There are dozens and dozens of variations. We'll look just quickly at 3 variations: ZK snarks, succinct, non-interactive arguments of knowledge, and they have a speed bump. They have an issue. What is it? They require a one-time trusted setup. Who watched the Zcash Genesis block, the video? They had 6 different parties, right? And then they had this toxic 6-sharded key at the end. And if they don't get rid of that toxic private key, those private key shards, what happens? I'll tell you about that in the future. So anyway, ZK snarks, that's one variation. And then the creators of ZK snarks said, well, let's get rid of this speed bump, this issue, and they created ZK starks, scalable, transparent arguments of knowledge. Transparent means no trusted setup is required, and these have the added benefit of being post-quantum secure. And then bulletproofs, again, no setup, and they're succinct. The proofs are only 188 bytes. However, they are not post-quantum secure. So bottom line, key takeaway, zero-knowledge proofs vary, and there's still a lot of development. It's still early days. So what's the deal with the trusted setup? And if those of you that were in the privacy session earlier today, go just to the red here and note this. If an attacker gets a copy of the private key, what can they do? They can create counterfeit Zcash, and no one would know. So this issue of the little speed bump of trusted setups is quite significant. So who's heard of Zcash and Monero? I saw quite a few of you. A little contrast now with Zcash and Monero, and this will give you some insight in how it's important to look at some of the underlying building blocks, especially in this case, the zero-knowledge proofs. So with Zcash, is privacy on by default? No, it's optional. And so what percentage of Zcash today is operating just like Bitcoin, where the sender and receiver address and the amount are out there on the ledger? Vast majority, right. Some people say about 80%, but it is the vast majority. And this is, a lot of this is human nature. If it's default turned off, they're not going to bother to turn it back on. Monero, sharp contrast, by default, it's private. And Monero uses many different mechanisms to achieve privacy. Stealth addresses, ring signatures, and recently, in fact, 10 days ago, 9 days ago, they replaced the ring CTs for confidential transactions with bulletproofs, a variant of zero-knowledge proofs. So what does that achieve? Why did they go from ring CT to bulletproofs? Reduce the transaction size, maybe by 80, 90%, depending on how you're measuring, and this drastically reduces fees, maybe from 50 cents to 2 cents. I copied here some, this is not statistically valid. I'm still waiting to hear some analysis, but you can drastically reduce the fees as a result of switching to bulletproofs. Another example, and just one key takeaway from this slide comparing ZK snarks and bulletproofs, look at the date for bulletproofs. When was the paper written for bulletproofs? It was published in 2017. So this is still fresh from academia, we're implementing, and the bulletproofs were audited by 2 separate entities. Sadulski Security, and also Quarks Lab. And what did Quarks Lab find? There were some significant findings. So typically when zero-knowledge proofs are implemented, independent third parties are requested to perform an audit. And so I urge you, if you're going to be investing in Monero, first look at bulletproofs and go read that report, the report by Quarks Lab, and there's all the slides have citations and sources on the bottom. So are privacy coins private enough? Well, it depends on your use case, right? The first answer is always, it depends. And this is something I don't want to, I really applaud all this pioneering work. But this comes from some of the original creators of Zcash, and they've come up with ZEXE. It's ZEXE, they all call it sexy. So what is ZEXE? It's a zero-knowledge execution environment. So you can perform the computations off-chain and come up with something that's publicly verifiable, an attestation. And what they're saying is that if you take Zcash, they call it, that's the prior work, it achieves data privacy, but not function privacy. So if you're a homeowner and you see a pipe like this leaking, that's trouble. And so the leaks, in some cases, are an indication that there's trouble. And what's an example of a leak? Who's familiar with smart contracts, Ethereum, ERC20, the tokens? Well, Ethereum supports many, many types of token contracts, and each represent a distinct currency. But there's a problem that even if you hide, using zero cash or a protocol, if you hide the details of the token payment, the corresponding transactions would still reveal which token was being exchanged. So this is just one example of the kind of leakage. And if you have enough leakage aggregated over time, then you no longer have privacy. So with that, that was just a quick tour through some privacy concerns with privacy coins and the underpinning zero-knowledge proofs. I'll be more than happy to entertain some questions now. Yes, I think there's a microphone in the middle.
I know I should probably go ahead and read some of those excerpts on bulletproofs, but could you give a summary of some of the pros, cons, benefits, and concerns from what you'd seen on Monero's bulletproofs?
Sure. So One of the concerns is over the verification time, so performance, and then again, it depends. But in the report from Quark's lab, there were at least two main classes of performance issues. And one was just implementation details. What is your security hygiene and what is your protocol hygiene for implementing bulletproofs? And then the other one was about there's the inner equations. I don't want to get into the moon math, but there are inner calculations inside the zero knowledge proofs, and there was some constructive criticism to improve that. But the Quark's lab finding was significant enough that at first it was withheld from public review until they could go fix some things behind the curtains. A lot of it gets very technical and in the weeds with some of the math, but they were very significant findings. Yes, question, microphone? I think then you record it. Thank you.
Can you speak to publication keys on zero-knowledge transactions? The ability to selectively reveal a transaction if you choose?
Can you explain the question a little more?
Say I create a transaction from me to you and wish to reveal the transaction to a third party by way of some revealing key. Is that a concept that you can talk about?
That sounds a little counter to the whole notion of maintaining your privacy with zero-knowledge proofs, because the main goal is to maintain privacy and not reveal any of that. I would say you might want to combine a different protocol. Even though if you're using zero-knowledge proofs, it's just one building block in a system, you could create something that would allow you to share any other keys.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. But that is another good point about zero-knowledge proofs. They don't preclude any other architectural design you may have in mind.
Given the pseudo-security, how confident are we with post and pre-quantum analysis, or the judgment that it's post-quantum verifiable or not verifiable?
So the question was about post-quantum security, and I think the jury's still out. And even if you say today, I think that this protocol is post-quantum secure, who's familiar with Schnorr's algorithm? That's something that says, okay, we have a shortcut for factoring large primes, right? So you could come up with in the future some shortcut that means that something you think today is post-quantum secure, a few years from now is not post-quantum secure. There might be some shortcut that we haven't dreamed of. Plus, I don't have access to a quantum computer. I don't know how it's going to behave, and I think it's a very rare, small set of people that do have access and can say, well, how is it going to perform? So the jury's still out. And some people say you have 10 to 15 years, 20, 30 years. So even the range of time you have before the quantum secure computers could crack things there's a wide range. Good question, thank you.
So are there public interests that want a backdoor methodology to gain access to these policy-wise? In other words, a backdoor.
Are you asking if there's a back door to this?
Yeah, and is there a movement to have something like that? Excuse me? Well, I don't know about that, but yeah. So that was the thing originally with Bitcoin, that everybody said, well, nobody can crack it or it's secure and all that, but it's pseudo, as we know. But these are attempting to be not that way, but why do they allow it in other words?
So yeah, I need a little bit more clarification on the question. So you're asking if there's a backdoor to the privacy coins or a backdoor to zero-knowledge proofs?
Well, it's just like with some governments want backdoors to different things, like operating systems or other things, and even though that was not kosher in the beginning, but it seems like nowadays it's going down that path or something. So I just wonder how governments would allow this to occur if they feel they cannot crack something, or it's, again, you get into the drug stuff and all the other things that they talk about, the utilization.
Okay, so if I understand your question, from a very high level, for zero-knowledge proofs to behave correctly, there's no such thing as being undermined. For instance, you might think of a backdoor like, what was it, the Clipper project, and there was a backdoor. That analogy really doesn't fit in the world of zero-knowledge proofs, although I think someone that could be very devious and try to get inside the moon math and create a backdoor to the moon math. But then if that code is out there and it's been fully audited, then people would detect that. But send me an email, that'd be something to ponder. But to the best of my knowledge, that and the way zero-knowledge proofs are constructed, that it mitigates against cheaters and they don't go out and say it's bulletproof, to use the bad metaphor, against any subversion like that. Okay, and with that, thank you for your attention.